I do think that it's a pivotal moment now for people who have been on the fence for buying, because I feel like as soon as everybody gets comfortable and these rates hold out a little bit longer on the dip,
Mm,
I think that they're going to see some changes in prices. I hope, we need to be careful because then if inflation jumps back up, then we're going to be in trouble again and rates could go up. So
you never
it's
know.
going to be delicate, I think, the next 6 months. But I think for those on the fence, if they're ready, now's a good time to jump in.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further.
Welcome back to another episode of Weiss Advice. I'm your host, as always, Yona Weiss. Here on this wonderful podcast, we have an amazing guest once again in the brand new year. Yes, we're recording this at the end of December, but this will be aired in the new year. And I just want to wish everyone a happy new year and hope you are doing well and have your goals set up so you can crush this year. I'm grateful to be here today with Parker Borofsky out of Tennessee. We are going to have a wonderful conversation talking about a lot of things, but primarily, I think your focus has been in the short term rental space, both on the investing side as well as the lending side, which is something we haven't. Well, we've talked about short term rentals a lot in this podcast, but we haven't talked about the lending side very much. And I'm excited to kind of dive into that. But before we do, Parker, just want to wish you a wonderful day and a good morning. And how you doing?
Doing great. Thank you. And right back at you. I hope you have a wonderful day as well. Yes, I'm excited to be here and hopefully I can share some great info for people for the new year so they can reach some of their real estate investing goals.
Absolutely. And before we do, kind of jump in, I'd love for you to give a little bit of a background, who you are, how you got started in the real estate game and, what you're working on.
Absolutely. So my name's Parker, obviously, and I wear many hats. So I am a mother and an investor of short-term rentals, and then also a lender that specializes in financing for short-term rentals. So I really focus on, there's a lot of intricacies that come with investment real estate financing that a lot of loan officers aren't quite aware of because they do a lot of primary homes on a day-to-day basis. I'm kind of the opposite of that. So I really love finding creative solutions for all the creative ideas
Right.
that our entrepreneurs have out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Parker is a little bit humble, but from the bio that I'm reading here, you've closed over 2,000 transactions over, nearly $1 billion in sales volume. So that's pretty impressive, especially for, what I would probably consider a smaller mortgage shop. I mean, I don't know how you judge smaller or big. But yeah, I mean, it's just pretty impressive to see that, and especially someone who's focusing specifically on the short-term rental space, which, just like you said, there's a lot of nuance and there's differences with regard to buying, a single family primary residence versus what someone might to call a second home or a vacation home, but also primarily investment properties. And I'd love for you to kind of jump in, just tell us a couple of the really nuances and the differences that one needs to look at when considering a loan on an investment, a short-term rental specifically.
Absolutely. Thank you. And so I think, one of the big things a lot of people try to calculate their own debt to income ratio. I see a lot of people kind of limit themselves on the front end by Googling information. I'm sure you get that too, people Googling cost segs. And I find that when people, unfortunately, there's not a lot of great lending information online and definitely not in Facebook groups with people that aren't loan officers answering lending questions. So, one of the things I really encourage people to do is to reach out to a loan originator who is familiar because there are things such as projected rental income that can be used even for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loans. A lot of people automatically assume they have to go DSCR because of their debt to income ratio. And depending on how close it is, they may be able to just do a regular Fannie Freddie 15% down investment occupancy loan
Hmm.
utilizing projected rental income. That product gets forgotten quite a bit. So, so it's little things like that. The tax returns really understanding
Mhm.
how to look at and calculate their rental income and how that helps offset the debt to income ratio. Also, another place I see people fall short when they come to me and think they can't. 7 out of 10 times, clients that come to me and think they have to do a DSCR don't have to do a DSCR.
So
But yeah,
before
so it's
we go a
mhm.
little deeper, can you just take a step back? Explain for maybe our listeners who don't know what a DSCR loan is. Maybe you just no, we love to cover all the basics and everything. And you know what? For me, as someone I actually worked in the mortgage space for a short period of time in the beginning of my real estate journey, but it was one of the biggest intimidation factors that I had getting into real estate was all the jargon and all of the acronyms. It was like, what is all? But you take a little time, you learn them, and then it's like, "Oh, it's harmless."
No, thank you for reminding me about that. I didn't even think about it. So DSCR is a debt service coverage ratio. And basically, it means it doesn't look at the debt to income ratio. And so if somebody has a debt to income ratio that's disqualifying, or maybe let's say they just started their own business this year and we can't use any income. So there's no income to use for a debt to income ratio. That's an example of when they would need to do that debt service coverage ratio. So what happens then is we review the property itself and get the fair market rents that it should generate short-term rental or long-term rental and compare that to the monthly payment. And then
Mm,
as long as it ratios, typically at least a 1-to-1, some products require higher ratios than others, but as long as the projected monthly rents are greater than the monthly payment, that's the main criteria for those
gotcha,
loan
gotcha,
types.
gotcha. Okay, and that's used primarily in commercial lending because we're looking at the debt service. We're looking at can the rents, which is it's investment property, it's commercial business property, can that cover the mortgage? Because the lender, in the end of the day, does not want to have to foreclose on the property. They do not want anything to do. So they want to make sure that there's less risk involved on their end.
Absolutely. Yes. Now, the reason I try to qualify clients in other products, if possible, is because that product is a little riskier than the others. So, therefore, it has typically a higher interest rate, higher down payment requirement. So, if I can get somebody qualified in a second home or investment occupancy loan, I will. But if not, that DSCR is always an option.
I mean, it's important to know because, like you said, people
Mhm.
come to you and they're thinking they need to, look at one specific product because that's what they've Googled and that's what Facebook groups are telling them, etc. But
Right.
there are a lot, you're saying there are other options. You mentioned the Fannie and Freddie, just simple, I guess, vacation rental or what do you call it, a second home loan or something like that?
Second home and investment occupancy.
Investment occupancy. Got you. So what does that mean? What does that entail?
So it's actually the same loan product. So if you go purchase a primary home using a Fannie Freddie backed loan, the primary, second home, and investment, it's the same product. It's just different occupancy types. So second home. A lot of the short term rentals that people purchase can fall under this category if they're
Mm,
purchasing in a destination that they also intend to use themselves. Like our Florida properties, gosh, we're probably there couple months of the year. You don't need to be there for a couple months of the year, but we love going down there. So, yeah, so if you purchase a property in an area you intend to use, obviously it may be a week out of the year, or a few weekends throughout the year, and then you rent it the rest of the time, totally fine. That's second home occupancy. The benefit there is 10% down as a down payment.
wow.
And then there's investment occupancy. So, again, the same loan type as the second home and primary, just a different occupancy. Investment. So if you did a long-term rental, it would have to go investment occupancy. Or if maybe you've bought multiple properties in the same area, those are going to need to be investment. You can't have multiple second homes. It just doesn't make sense
In the same area,
in the
right,
same area,
right, right.
right? You can have them in different areas, but not the same area. And that investment occupancy is 15% down.
Is there a limit on that as how many you can have? I think Fannie has like 10 properties or something is a limit there.
10 finance properties. Yep.
Gotcha.
That brings me to another point. That's another thing I'll really try to do with clients. When you said, what are some of those intricacies? I'll really try to qualify if it's a married couple or even friends or family that want to go in together on a property. If we can qualify the loan under just one of them, I'll
Mhm.
really encourage them to do that just so that we're not taking up one for both. So I've got couples and families now. I actually have one family where we've now done like 10 in the son, 10 in the mom, 10 in the dad. So they've got 30
Wow.
conventional loans for their short term rentals in their business. And not all loan originators will know, especially if they're in the primary home, they'll just say, hey, that's fine. Sure, let's keep you both on there. We're all really encourage people to think through.
That's a really important point. And I think just kind of think a little bit out of the box as well. Someone who may be getting started and may not necessarily have themselves the ability to qualify for a loan for whatever reason that may be, maybe the credit score, or maybe they don't have the income to show. But if they can get a partner who can sign on the loan and give them something in return, whatever that may be, some partnership involved, that's a great way to qualify for loan products that you may not otherwise be available to you.
Absolutely. Yes. I've had several do that, start with a partner. And then once they have some rental income showing on their tax returns, then they can work their way to qualifying. Yeah, absolutely. Great suggestion.
Yeah. Now, what about you as an investor, right? You also operate and run short-term rentals. How long have you been doing that for?
Since 2018. So gosh, 5 years, almost 5 years now.
That's pretty
Or no,
cool.
it has been 5 years. Feels like 100.
Yeah, I know, right? It's almost the time flies. But what's your favorite thing
Yeah.
about actual side of that business? Because it is a business in of itself, right? Besides for the lending, obviously, is one thing. The running of the short-term rentals is something else.
Yeah, it's been great. So we've got 8 in the Smoky Mountain and 4 in the Panhandle of Florida. And it's kind of, I say addictive. So, especially after you get those first few, it's like some days it's, I love this, and other days it's, why did I sign up for this? What am I doing? So, yeah, we started in 2018, started buying in the Smokies. And as most people know, it's pretty awesome back then. It's still awesome. It's different now, but it's still awesome. The most recent one we purchased in the Smokies was January of 22. So, almost 2 years ago. But yeah, it's been great. It's an experience. My husband and I do manage all of our rentals. I've seen a shift. So it used to be you could just set it and forget it on Airbnb and it was fine. Now that there are a lot more people in the game and on Airbnb, you've got to step it up a little bit, pay a little more attention to listings and rankings. And so I do encourage more so now than ever. I encourage folks out there, if you're in this, to get involved with some of those groups, the short term shop, build short term rental wealth with Bill Faith. I actually got in Avery Carl, is how I was introduced
Yeah.
to short term rentals back in 2018. And so, yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. I mean, she's amazing. And what she's done for the short-term rental community, and specifically the Smoky Mountains, I think she's literally single-handedly changed the entire entire area of that part of the country, which is pretty impressive. Talk about a change, market changes, right? When you want to see something, and I always tell her that, if I want to invest in a property, I want to know where she's opening up a new brokerage in a new market. Because they've opened, I think, 10 or so different markets, and that's little by little they're taking over. But that's pretty impressive. And so, by you self managing your own properties and doing that, I mean, essentially, from what I've seen from a lot of other people, it's literally like changed their lives in terms of the financial independence that it's created and the ability yeah, I mean, it's a business. It's still, like you said, you can't just set it and forget it. There's some time needs to be spent in materially
Mhm.
participating in it for that side of things, but also just taking care of make sure the business runs well. But what's the goal? I mean, essentially, in doing that, obviously, like you mentioned at the very beginning, you're a mother, so obviously you're a family person, and that seems like that's an important role. So how do you balance, running the family, running the business, running the mortgage business? Seems like a lot of hats to wear.
It is a lot of hats to wear. I have a wonderful husband and a great partner, and on the family and short term rental side. And then I have an awesome team behind me on the mortgage side as well. So I probably don't give them enough credit publicly as they should, but they're amazing. So I've got an LO partner, Rob, who handles a lot of the pre-approvals and getting loans through. And then got Melissa and Lisa and Casey, and they all help process everything and get this. Yeah, they're amazing. a lot of the if anyone out there has done anything with us, I'm sure they'll know all those names. So, yeah, when it comes to balance, I don't know if there is such a thing. Everyone says balance, balance, but I don't know that there is. It's more just wake up every day and make it happen. So, now I will say though, so I've never liked property management companies. I think they've always, especially the big ones, the Vicasos and then the Smokies. Smokies was built on short-term rentals
Right.
but back then it was management companies before Airbnb and Vrbo became as popular. And I just feel like these big management companies they just don't do a good job of maintenance, of treating customers right. But what I have seen that's really cool emerge in the last year or so are co-hosts. And I like these co-hosts because these are people that typically own, not all of them, but most of them own their own properties. So they really understand the experience. And now that everything like the rankings and
Hmm.
listings and marketing is becoming more important, I don't think it's a bad idea to have I've actually thought about it for myself to look at doing that just to have somebody take over
Hmm.
some of those aspects. So yeah, I'm still not a fan of property management, but I do encourage people to look at co-hosts.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, it's very different than having a property manager. I mean, it's having more of a partner in a way, but someone who really does care about the customer. Like you said, unfortunately, larger property management companies are not going to care as much. I mean, they're taking a huge amount of the revenue, but they're not necessarily focusing on. No, I'm not saying that none of them do, but I think the co-hosts, and especially if they're people who are driven, like you said, they have their own properties and they're driven. The more revenue they can create, the more experience they can create, the greater income they're going to get. Essentially, especially if it's some sort of partnership that's worked out like that. Whereas the property manager typically just taking like a flat fee or a flat percentage, and so they're not incentivized as much to take care of that. That's fascinating. But what you're saying in terms of the algorithms and the platforms are using, it makes a huge difference. I mean, if you, especially in markets that are so, I mean, there's so many choices, right? If someone goes and like, I want to, in the Smokies with a hot tub or whatever it is, they're going to have a plethora of choices out there. So how do you get your listing to the top? How do you make sure to have, like, the best reviews, etc.? Some tips, some tricks on that that you've learned over the years.
Well, I'm working on it. So our properties have always done well, but I will say when mortgage was just insane, and before my husband quit his WT job, that was some of our listings kind of went to the wayside a little. We still did well though, maybe because of our longevity. We had good reviews and everything. But I recently had pictures remade and I realized to my horror that one of our small little studio cabin listings had like 4 pictures on it. It was really bad on Airbnb. So we had made pictures like a year and a half ago, and I guess they only got updated on Vrbo, but not Airbnb. Still booked. Couldn't tell you why, but it still did well. But now I'm sure it will do tremendously better.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, my advice there obviously is check your listings, refresh them, make sure you've got the right wording in there, excitement, headlines to grab attention as they come in. And pricing, you've got to like we use Price Labs, love Price Labs, but you've got to really actively Price Labs isn't even set it and forget it because they're not always 100% accurate. You got to stay on top of that and stay competitive.
You're saying it's not just like you said before, it's not just like set it and forget it. There are these softwares that you're using to try to figure out what the best price is for the right time, the right place. It's not just like one standard set fee every night of the year. Seasonally, obviously those prices changes, but even maybe if you're having longer bookings, does that change the price potentially?
Yeah, you mean like longer stays
Yeah,
throughout the week?
exactly. Like if I'm staying for 3 nights as opposed to 7 nights, am I going to get a better price?
Yeah, I mean, not always, but I would recommend that, a discount for like a 5-night stay, a
Right.
7-night stay to encourage those longer bookings because that's just less wear and tear, less turnover, less hassle when you can get the longer stays for sure.
That's true. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And speaking of softwares, I mean, Price Labs, you mentioned that's one. Are there any other like softwares that you have, picked up that are really like, and there's like hundreds of them when it comes to
Yeah.
the short-term rental space specifically. But, besides for obviously the Airbnb, the VRBO, and then these Price Labs things, what other type of softwares and things that are really helping you to stay on top of the game?
think the most important one, especially with multiple properties, is going to be the PMS system or property management system. And so I've been using Guesty, which has been good. I don't have a lot of complaints about it. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. We're actually switching to Owner Res though, just because I feel like Owner Res is a little more robust, has more options, can do a few more things. And I think it'll be an easier platform to. We're also looking at doing direct bookings and with our own website.
Okay.
And OwnerRes seems to, I think, support that a little bit more than Guesty. But Guesty's been great. So for somebody who just wants something simple, easy, straightforward, doesn't have as many properties or complications, I think Guesty is fantastic. For those that want to dig in a little more, definitely look at OwnerRes.
Yeah, and like you said, taking it offline. I know some investors that have had extreme, tremendous success in bringing in, people through their own website as opposed to through Airbnb or through other platforms because in one sense you're able to kind of like own that lead, so to speak, or that guest, and you're
Yeah.
not subject to the fees that come along with Airbnb, etc., as well as just the, the randomness that you're subject to. And especially people may have a lot more success with return, customers when they're booking through your own website. So that's an important factor, I think, it's underestimated a lot because people think, "Oh, I can only put up the property on Airbnb and VRBO, whatever, and then, that's it." But no, it does take some marketing. It does take obviously some effort in doing that, but I think there's a lot of potential. Now, I'm speaking not from experience, just from what I've spoken to and heard from other hosts and other people who have been successful in doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I encourage people too, is that, don't be intimidated. If you're thinking about getting into the short term world,
Mhm.
don't be intimidated by all this information. Like, really just join some of those big Facebook groups because there's a lot of support. Don't listen to the lending advice on there
No, listen.
or the tax advice, but the software advice and the booking advice and, how to manage. That's a ton of great resources
Yeah, how to
when,
deal
when
with
it comes to that.
how to deal with disgruntled guests, right?
Yes, yes, huge support systems,
And
absolutely.
bears. Yes.
Yeah, and bears.
Have you had that? You've had some of the because you have properties in the Smokies, right? You mentioned.
Oh, yeah, yeah, we had a bear ruin 2 hot tub covers this year in the same cabin, and then I had to do a little research, like, why are they trying to get in the hot tub? Well, apparently, they like the material. I can't remember what it's called, but the material that a lot of them are made out of, they like to chew on it.
Mm,
Who knew? So, we're looking at getting a hard top.
yeah. Well, at least they didn't, go in.
Right, right. They do sometimes. I don't think they didn't get it open, but they, yeah, tried.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. I mean, to think about you have to deal with bears, but you're out in the nature, you're out in the natural surroundings. You'll deal with that, I'm sure. Coming in the new year, I know obviously, like we said, we're starting a new year. Interest rates have dropped a bit, and hopefully will continue to do so. I think that's been a big factor for a lot of people in terms of finding new properties. But I mean, obviously, the markets are a factor as well. I've seen a decrease during 2023 in terms of the lending, and then do you see that increasing potentially in the coming year?
Definitely, yeah, we definitely had a big drop in 2023. Just to give you an idea, so we closed 323 million in 22, and we're going to end at about 120 in 23. So pretty big dip, and
Yeah.
understandably. I will say though, to your point with the rates, I feel like, and I'm not an overly optimistic person. Generally, I'm pretty real. I'm positive, don't get me wrong, but I like to be pretty real. So, when rates started going up, everyone's like, oh, they'll stop in 6 months. I was like, yeah, let's just see. And I keep a really close eye on the pattern of the market. And
Yeah.
so what's happened in the last year is rates would spike and then they would dip and then they would spike and dip and spike and dip. But the overall trend was increase.
Hmm.
And so what I've seen different with this last cycle of when the rates have dipped, I'm starting to feel a little better now because I feel like we've broken the cycle because rates dipped and then instead of spiking again and dipping, they dipped and then dipped and then dipped. So now the rate pricing we see today is about where we were June of last year, or well, this year. So
Interesting.
yeah, so we've gone back about 6 months at this point and hoping that this pattern holds. So I am now optimistic that we're in a downward trend. There may be a couple spikes along the way, but I think again, overall, like the pattern last year, I think it'll just be backwards.
Right.
So
And how long
yeah.
have you been in
But
the lending business? Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think that's
yeah,
a relevant, very good, relevant question.
yeah, no, absolutely. Gosh, 2016, so almost 8 years now.
Oh wow, okay. So I mean,
Yeah,
you've seen a couple of the cycles, go through, especially with COVID and everything.
yeah, absolutely. I do think that it's a pivotal moment now for people who have been on the fence for buying, because I feel like as soon as everybody gets comfortable and these rates hold out a little bit longer on the dip,
Mm,
I think that they're going to see some changes in prices. I hope, we need to be careful because then if inflation jumps back up, then we're going to be in trouble again and rates could go up. So
you never
it's
know.
going to be delicate, I think, the next 6 months. But I think for those on the fence, if they're ready, now's a good time to jump in.
I heard, and I don't know if this is correct, but I heard recently a stat about the amount of time that the average investor holds a property for, and I think something really shocking was that, especially with short-term rentals, people for their first property, I think like 50% of people sell it within the first year or 18 months or something like that. Which just because, people will get into it and then they just, they don't succeed or they have other things come up in their life or whatever. I'm sure there's a lot of factors. But I mean, have you seen that type of, transaction, happening? People, I mean, you probably don't see on the sale side as much, but I mean, have you seen that or is that just I'm making that up?
No, I have, but I think a big part of that, which I don't know how it would be tracked. I think you're right, but I think a lot of that was people selling to get the equity out to purchase bigger properties.
Interesting.
There's a lot of 1031 exchanges, and especially between what 2018 and early this year, I mean, just huge jumps in value,
Sure.
right? Which I think wasn't seen. So I'm not sure when I've heard that, and I'm not sure the span of that data, but if I had to guess, I bet a lot of that was people upgrading. Because a lot of my clients, actually, it's the opposite. One of the reasons we do so much volume is repeat clients.
Hmm.
They typically purchase two, three. I've got several clients now that have 10 or 20 or 30.
That's awesome.
So, yes. So I think that the people I've talked to personally that have actually reached out and said, "Hey, this isn't doing as well as I thought it was." It's happened maybe 5 times that they've reached out to me and said that. What was interesting to me is every time it was with a property management company.
Interesting.
And so I really encourage them to try to do some self-managing. And I maybe heard back from 1 or 2 that said that was it. I don't know if the other 3 did. Yeah, so but to your point too, it's not for everybody. I think you kinda said, "What's the goal?" Right?
Right.
I think and that's an important question for people to ask themselves. So, are you do you want to leave your I don't wanna leave my W-2 job, but I could.
Hmm.
We've said I'd like to have the freedom and the option, and so if mortgage were to fall apart tomorrow, I could live on the revenue from our rentals. So I feel good about that. I can retire when I want to. So that's what investing in these rentals has allowed for me. And
Hmm.
and that freedom, those options are what's important to me. But for somebody else, maybe they hate their W-2 job now and they just want out. Maybe they're like 2 years, get me out.
For sure.
So, yes, I definitely think that why is important.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Parker, I want to transition now to what we call the final four. These are the four questions that I ask all my guests. And the first one is, what's the worst job that you ever had?
For a very brief moment in time, I was administrative for a dating service. And so, yeah, I
That's
think I
cool.
was yeah, I think I was like 22 or 23 at the time. And first of all, I am not an admin. Admin is not my strength to start with. I am more the creative thinker, the problem solver. But yeah, that was my least. Because it was very systematic and it just was not fun.
Yeah, I'm sure you had some interesting experiences and interactions though, because that sounds like a job that would come with that. But yeah, the admin aspect, I definitely hear that.
Yeah, maybe if it was like the sales or the like matching people, that probably would have been fun. But the admin part was not. I also cleaned horse stalls at one point, but I liked that better than the admin
There you go. I guess that
part.
says it all. What's a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift?
Actually, just recently, I don't know why it took me so long to read this, but the Pumpkin Plan really
Hmm,
has been fantastic. So just a different way to think about not only short-term rentals, but also the mortgage. I mean, there's just so many, it's so applicable to so many things and just really helped me kind of get more of those juices flowing and kind of that reflection that I think I needed.
interesting.
So
It's the first time I've actually heard of that book. Can you tell me briefly, like what's the premise? What's it about?
it's really about the background. The reason it's called the Pumpkin Plan is because it's about a farmer who has figured out how to grow the world's biggest, huge, massive pumpkins. They have pumpkin contests. It's not that's not just chance. You don't just plant a bunch of pumpkins and say, "Hey, I got a great pumpkin." So it's really about how to have that the discipline and the foresight and the insight into being the biggest, best pumpkin, but deeper than that, it goes into the whys and the hows, right?
Mhm.
So I think one of my challenges this past year has been, you know, I've always done a great job for clients. I've never had a problem keeping clients. We get referrals to us.
Right.
But this last year has been really tough with interest rates because everybody's rate shopping.
Sure.
And I get it. I understand it. I don't like it. It drives me nuts, but I
Mhm.
understand it. So I had to think, okay, we're not always going to be the lowest price, right? So this
Mhm.
book really helps me identify what is it about my team? What is it about me that
Mm,
produces this huge pumpkin? And the one thing we're really good at is complicated. So, we have good pricing. Don't get me wrong, our rates are great. But there have been some cases with some credit unions or banks where they just hold them in house and we don't have those products,
right.
but we can do complicated, and that's where we really shine. So it's kind of helped me refocus the mortgage biz and where to take that. And I think with rates coming down, you're not going to see those big variations on
Right.
different products like that for a while. But yeah, so that book is really about kind of honing in and figuring out what your seed is to grow your tremendous pumpkin.
Love it. That's
So
awesome. Okay. Well, I'm gonna make sure to put that in the show notes, and that's definitely getting on my reading list, which has grown every time I have a new guest on the episode. But no, it's always great
nice.
to have a new book there to check out. Third question is, what's a skill or talent that you would like to learn?
Public speaking.
Well, I listen, I think you're doing great at this. This
Uh,
is yeah, but that's definitely an awesome skill to have. And I've mentioned this before. Occasionally, people mention this as a skill, and I always recommend the book "Steal the Show." Or is it called "Steal the Show"? Yeah, I think it's called "Steal the Show" by Michael Port. Probably one of the best public speaking books that I've ever come across. Michael Port was one of the he's an actor and Broadway and television actor, and also one of the biggest sought after public speakers, keynote speakers, etc. So definitely recommend the book, Steal the Show, put it on your reading list.
awesome. Yeah, no, absolutely. I will. It's really funny. I have to share this. So I did a little public speaking gig in Orlando a couple months ago. And thank goodness it was a smaller crowd. And thank goodness I had a friend there. I went on stage and my mouth, it just got really dry. Like my mouth has never been so dry in my life. And to the point where my lips were sticking to my teeth. It was so embarrassing. And so my friend saw this, brought me a bottle of water. I was very appreciative for.
Oh,
And then I proceeded to try to drink it and it poured down the front of my shirt. So the crowd was great. I just told him, I was like, oh, you can't take me anywhere. And everything was fine after that. So I figured if I can survive that, I'll be okay.
that's
But
great. Some people that would
yeah,
make them, kind of close them up to the to try to do it again.
definitely an experience. Yeah.
Uh,
kind
Well, awesome. Well, good luck with that. And fourth and final question is, what does success mean to you?
of what I touched on earlier. I think for me, success is twofold. One, it's creating that freedom and those choices of what do I want to wake up and do today? And some people have to go to work. I mean, I guess there's always a choice, but in order to survive, they have to wake up and go to that W-2 job. They don't have other alternatives. And so I feel like success is setting yourself up to have more of those opportunities, to have more choices and more freedoms. So yeah, that's really, and I feel like when you get to that point, and then also I think it helps because then you can do what you love. I mean, I love doing mortgages. That's why I still do this.
Mhm.
Don't get me wrong. It's like rentals. Some days I'm like on top of the world, and other days I'm like, why am I subjecting myself to this? But for the most part, I really love helping others, and I let others achieve their successes,
Right.
to see them have options and grow and their excitement. And so I see success as having options.
Awesome. Love it. Wow, Parker, this has been awesome. I'm so grateful we've had the opportunity to catch up today and learn more about the mortgage business and short-term rentals. It's really been insightful. Finally, where can our listeners find you or reach out to you if they want to?
Yeah. So I do work for Movement Mortgage. That we're a team within Movement. We're actually about to launch a website in the next 30 days for our team. And it'll be Wealth Builders Mortgage Group. It'll be wealthbuildersmortgage.com is the
Okay.
website. But they can also find me on Facebook or email. So I don't know if we can put
Yeah.
those up somewhere for them to
Yeah, put it
find
up.
too. But
Tell us what it is. We'll make sure to put it in the show notes. Everyone needs to
okay.
know there's a whole show notes every podcast has. So you just click the information icon on the podcast and it pulls up all this great, I know it has exact transcription, but usually my team puts a summary of the podcast and the timestamps as well as all the information that we're going to share here.
Perfect. That's fantastic. Oh, and one more thing, because this is important to your business, I get a lot of questions all the time about cost segs and qualifying for
Mm,
future purchase and debt to income ratio. So I want to assure everybody that cost segs are fantastic and do not hurt your income, because we will add every penny of depreciation back into your rental income calculation. And I just get that question so many times. I figured this was a great platform to let everyone know cost segs are great. Do them.
yes, 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 yes. Thank you so much for mentioning that. And the great thing about you is that you know that because there are so many lenders out there, believe it or not, that don't for some reason, and that messes up a lot of people, which is why they get the question because they're like, "Well, I went to my local bank," and they're like, "No, you have no income because you have all this depreciation deduction." So makes no sense. It's part of the
Mm-mm.
Fannie lending guidelines is you add back depreciation, but
Mhm.
for some reason, people don't do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you again for taking the time. It's really been a lot of fun, and I hope everyone got as much value as I did out of this. And I just want to thank you, like I said, because I'm repeating that, but I want to thank our listeners as well for joining us all the way to the end once again. And remember, until next time, the best advice comes only when you ask.
Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.